Welcome back to Funky Politics, the hardest hitting political show on the planet. That's right, Funky Politics, folks. That is me. That is us. That is we. I am DC, your host of this wonderful program. And let me tell you something. Today, we're going to have an exciting show planned for you. I want to jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about, just briefly, registration, education, mobilization. It's what we're all about, y'all. A voteless people is a hopeless people. I'm telling you right now. Most states, and I'll say this, the general elections for most states it's gonna be probably August, right? So I know in Tennessee you got until July, I think it's 17th. Make sure you get your registration done. Registration, education, mobilization. You can't have a voteless people because you become a hopeless people. Make sure, get your registration in, get it in right now. Remember, absentee ballots. COVID-19, if you're 60 years of age, excuse me, especially in the state of Tennessee, I know that you can request an absentee ballot. If you're a senior, you can request an absentee ballot. Remember, register to vote. Voting matters. That's proven right now, right? Jumping right along, Quinnipiac poll. The Quinnipiac poll has 45 as approval rating at about as low as it can get. It's at about 40% right now. The president is in a neck and neck, y'all, a neck and neck statistical dead heat, according to Quinnipiac poll, which is a pretty reliable poll. With Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, he's sitting at about 43%. Texas, believe it or not, Texas, they are neck and neck, 44 and 43 again in a state. You're talking about a red state. Texas, you don't get no red in Texas. And of course, you know what they say about Texas. But anyway, the president's feeling the heat and he's beginning the MAGA tours in a city near you. So check him out. No, I'm joking. Nobody I know is going to go. COVID-19 is officially here to stay, y'all. For a minute at least, according to scientists, they say we're not in a second wave right now. But when the states reopened and all of these cities and counties, localities reopened, a lot of scientists are saying that was really too soon. But I understand that there's a very major need for the economy to get started again. But I think right now we're seeing in a lot of states where hospitalizations, and that's that key indicator they're looking for. Hospitalizations are increasing. Some states by 30%, some by 40%, some even by 60%. Watch yourself. Make sure you observe the social distancing. Make sure you wear your mask out in public. Make sure you wash your hands. COVID-19 is not gone. Say his name, George Floyd. But please don't forget others like Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rashad Brooks. And there's countless others that are out there. Stay safe, stay alive. Somewhere I read the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights. Dr. King said that. Don't forget that. And speaking of what's right, we've got a young brother in the studio with us today, Isaac Fordjour, who's a director of federal government affairs and health policy with Boston Scientific out of Washington, D.C. The brother is magnanimous. He is out there, y'all. He is probably going to be considered for one of those secretarial cabinet positions. We'll see. We'll talk to him a little bit about politics, a little bit about the nation, a little bit about protesting, a little bit about healthcare policy as we go forward, right? So stick around, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Isaac Fordjour right here on Funky Politics.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Brother Fordjour, welcome to Funky Politics. And man, you know what? We just want to live, Doc. We just want to live, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Every time I hear that sends chills down my spine, man. That brother nailed it.
I mean, I'm telling you, man, we work with Noble on that. We worked with 100 Black Men, and I tell you, man, it was phenomenal, the work we did with them. And just to see that young man elicit the feelings out of us. And all we want to do is live. But speaking
You
about
know,
let
they
me
say they say
go
they
ahead.
say the children will lead us, right? So
Whoa.
yeah, you
Preach,
know,
doc. Preach, doc. Preach
yeah,
now.
yeah.
I want to get right into it. I want to kind of go from a global perspective and come on back to our shores here. Just recently, the president decided to pull about 10,000 troops from Germany. Germany is not, I would say Germany is probably, other than Britain, our strongest ally, our strongest partner out there. Of course, the precedent goes back to the ending of the World War II. But why are we tampering? And it looks like it could be personal, but why are we tampering with sound foreign policy that's worked well for us, Brother Fordjour?
Foreign policy is not, my area of expertise, but I think, there's some things that are just obvious. I mean, the president has made it clear that, he's putting forth an America first policy, and that he's sort of trying to pull us away from our engagements around the world. Why we would, get out of Germany, I don't know. I think there's been an oversimplification of the role our troops are playing there. I don't think that the administration, at least from my view, has a good understanding of how important it is to have us there. But I think this is consistent with what we've seen from this administration over and over again, and I think we'll see more and more of it.
Yeah, and staying right there, of course, we're still, I think, considered the greatest power on the planet in terms of a country. But we've also become somewhat of a pariah. I mean, we are not the that city on a shining hill as we used to be called. You got France, you've got Germany, you've got Britain, you've got a lot of other countries that are really stepping forward. And as you just said, I mean, we've almost become a little disengaged with the world affairs. Does
Yeah,
that make sense to you? I mean,
yeah, it makes sense, and it's a part of the conversation about who do we want America to be. I wouldn't go as far as to say that we're a pariah. I have family in West Africa and Ghana, and if you look around the world, America, American culture, the American ideals, it's still that shining city on the hill that people want to come to. And I think when you talk to people overseas, there's an understanding that America may we don't really understand why America chose the current leadership. So I think
sure.
people around the world sort of give us a pass right now. Now, if things go the same direction with the next election, they'll be like, oh, y'all meant it the first time. But I think America, we're in a battle against China for economic strength. To say that we're the most powerful country in the world, I think if we rest on those laurels and we don't continue to engage and do those things that have made America, the country that it is, by investing in other countries and helping other third world nations, sort of do better. If we don't continue those things, we're going to be in trouble. And I think it's a time of reckoning for us as a country.
And I think that speaks to, I think it speaks to his proposal to withdraw from the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us will doubt the fact that maybe the World Health Organization was not as quick to ascribe blame. But I think there's plenty of time to ascribe blame about COVID-19, don't you? I mean, after this thing,
Absolutely.
after we've kind of gotten it by the
Absolutely.
throat a little bit, but we're even talking
Absolutely.
about withdrawing from there, Isaac.
And that's, from where I sit, that's a huge problem. When you start talking about withdrawing from making sure the health of the world,
Well,
when we look at the organization, when we look at vaccinations, look, when we talk about borders are political things, right?
yes.
But we live in a global economy where people are moving back and forth. If you see how easily these diseases are coming from country to country. So look, as long as countries overseas are doing well and they're vaccinated and they're healthy, that speaks to our own health as well. We don't sit over here on an island alone. So organizations like the World Health Organizations, those are important, and our investments there are critical.
Wow. And, speaking of investments, the Congress, and I think with some cajoling from the Democrats, really stepped forward on stimulus 1, 2, and 3. But I think now there's some talk right now of an additional stimulus, some that possibly will help farmers more, some that possibly will try to restructure that unemployment benefit. Someone is thinking that people are sitting at home drawing $600 extra a week, and that's satisfying to them. I don't know who thinks this, and there may be some, but brother, come on. In a city like a Washington D.C., $600 a week plus whatever the allocation is from the district, I'm not so sure that's going to be able to pay the rent, let alone
Yeah.
live comfortably.
Yeah, I don't know. Particularly if someone has a taste like you do, and enjoys the
Come on
finer
now.
things of life like you. Look, there's a long-standing belief that people, would rather be on unemployment than to work, and this goes back. We've heard this conversation throughout our
Sure.
lifetimes, as a political football, and we know that that's just not true. Um, you know, uh, there is talk of an additional stimulus. I would say that for once, Congress stepped up in a big way. And if it weren't for the stimulus that they've done up until this point, God knows where the country would be,
Sure.
as imperfect as the execution of it has been. But you're right, there is talk about doing another stimulus bill, which I think will probably come to the floor sometime mid to late July.
Oh,
Yeah, so they're working on it now. Congress will be back next week, and they're working on it now. Some of the things, we're getting into the season. We're getting closer and closer to an election time.
sure.
So the closer you get to election, the more complicated really doing things becomes, because everything is viewed through the prism of who's gaining an advantage and who's not. But right now, Republicans and Democrats are, there are a couple of big places where they are not aligned. One is on this idea of the unemployment insurance that you talked about.
Sure.
Do they extend that? There are some that say that as we see more of the economies opening up around the country, if we don't, look at the second wave that's coming, as we see these economies open up around the country, is there a need for more stimulus? Are people actually returning to work? So Republicans seem to say, let's watch and see how that's going, how people are returning to work. We may not need to invest in that anymore. Democrats, of course, are saying that we need to get more money in the hands of people until we are completely on the other side of this. So we'll see how that plays out. The other area is one around liability protections, right?
Mm.
The ability to sue for contracting COVID or anything related to that. And you see Republicans they've drawn a red line that says that any package that comes to the floor that the president signs has to include liability protections for businesses. And that's something that, of course, Democrats,
So,
they're
so,
not going
so,
to
so,
pass.
are you saying? And I'm just going to throw a company out there. I'm working in the hub at either UPS or FedEx. FedEx is local here in Memphis, but I'm working in the hub, and of course, I come down with COVID in the hub or whatever, or my route. There's a possibility I can recover from my company, and is that what Congress is trying to abate or trying not to happen to hold
Right.
these corporations liable?
Well, it's that, and then there's some companies that have started to provide PPE for their protective
Oh,
equipment for. So there, these protections are already built in for some companies, but as more and more companies are having to provide PPE, if those things prove not to prevent the transmission of COVID, yeah, you have the ability to go in and sue.
well, let's jump around just real quickly. Uh, the protests. The
Yeah,
protests to me have galvanized the world, and it started locally here, of course, in our country. But when you see countries like Sweden, Finland, Poland, places in Russia, China, you start to think, wait a minute, maybe we have more allies than we think. And George Floyd looked like you and I, not like a bunch of them. Are they finally saying, is the world saying, we see racism, but we also see that our world is not going down the right path, and it has probably something to do with our leadership, or is it just racism in your estimation at this point?
I think it's all of that, right? Racism has been here, right? Racism
Mhm.
is nothing new. We know it's nothing new in America, but it's nothing new in Europe. When they're in the streets talking about Black Lives Matter, they're talking about our lives over here in America. They're
Yes.
talking about what they're dealing with over there as well. And so, yes, I think there's this unrest that we all feel. I mean, you can't go outside your house without having the fear of contracting a disease. The economy failing everywhere you look. The institutions that we believe in are all starting to fail us. And then, I think this was a culmination of all those moments coming together. And I think it's powerful to see all those
Mm.
people in the
Yes.
streets in Europe talking about Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So I think we're in a real moment here. And I think, you know, we have to take advantage of it. I think there are things that will happen that will change, but change begins on the inside and in the
Yes.
hearts,
That's right.
and we have to see what really happens. Time will tell.
Well, time will tell, and of course, I talked about in the opening, but politics. We've got races on hand. We've got some pretty solid races out there. And I know you do governmental affairs. And I'm going to ask you what Boston Scientific's position is. But just from a personal standpoint, it looks like, I'm just saying, it looks like numbers don't lie. And polling, of course, is what polling is. And you've done it before. You know the story behind it. Polling matters only to those people who are reading it. Votes matter in the booth, and that's how it works. But you got places like Arizona with McSally, Iowa with Ernest, Tillis in North Carolina, Collins in Maine, and Gardner in Colorado. And then let's just say that Jones is not held over in Alabama, it really looks like there's a possibility that the Senate could actually flip. And I don't think we didn't see this time last year, 2 years from now, 2 years ago. Am I right?
We didn't see this 2 months ago. I mean,
You're right.
The rate at which things have been changing is incredible. And I think you've outlined the races. In each of those races, I believe Democrats have a real shot at flipping. They've been able to field strong candidates who are raising, incredible amounts of money. I would add to that list a long shot, but even in South Carolina. If you look at Jamie Harrison, brothers running in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham, even in Kentucky with Mr. McConnell. So these are all, they're, what we have learned is as they say, the only poll that matters is a poll on election day.
Exactly.
But we have learned just as quickly as things have shifted for us to be in this environment where we can actually see flipping the Senate, things can flip the other way. We still have, 140 so, days to the election, and things can go the other way as well. So I think there's a good shot. What happens at the top of the ticket is going to be very important. I think the enthusiasm that the presidential campaign, with what we see out here in the streets, if that translates to the polls, it's going to be something incredible to watch. But I think the chances of things flipping as we plan for what's going to happen here in Washington, we definitely are looking at that as a real possibility going forward.
I didn't even handicap the Georgia race. I mean, you literally got 2 senators on the ballot, and easily one of those seats could be flipped. We got Warnock down there, and you got Ossoff down there in Georgia. And I think, and this is just my prognostication, I would think that maybe one is good for the picking. And I know you're in the business, and it's your job to know these kinds of things. I'm not asking you to go on record, but go ahead.
Well, thankfully, they don't pay me for the results, because I have found myself being wrong more than I'm right. Things are just so volatile right now. You just don't know. I mean, polls. Look what happened in 2016, right?
Sure, that's right.
The polls have proven us wrong, and we scratch our head the next day, wondering what happened, because we just knew how things would turn out. But there are other things that we have to think about. There's voter turnout, there's voter suppression, which I think is something that we're not talking enough about in our communities. When we look at COVID and the impact that COVID has had, what does that mean on election day for people who, maybe should look at mailing in their ballots? But, if there's some funny business that happens around that and people want to go and show up, if you think that the lines were long, in years past, if you can imagine with the reduced number of polling locations and social distancing in place. So, the polls may show us looking good going into it, but we have to be vigilant and determined to vote and watch out for their voter suppression out there.
And speaking of being determined to vote, Vice President Biden has made a decision that he is going to pick a running mate who will be a woman. And that is fantastic. That's fantastic for the country. That's fantastic for the world. And a lot of people, a lot of the talking heads, a lot of the politicos out there, you got people on both sides. You got folks that he's got to pick an African-American female to shore up the ticket, to make sure that those of us who are out there, we turn out. I think we're going to turn out anyway. I just read something recently where Senator Warren is a very strong contender. Who's odds-on favorite in your estimation right now? What does it look like? I'm just asking you. It's just one of those things. I mean, we're not going to hold you to it, I don't think.
Okay. Well, first of all, we're friends, so I feel okay correcting you, right?
All right.
I don't buy the "we're going to turn out anyway"
Oh,
argument, right?
whoa.
We have seen that we've had a reason to turn out. There've been protests in the street.
Mhm.
There've been we had a flawed candidate, as many of us see as a flawed candidate in President Trump last go around, and you would have
Sure.
thought that we were all going to turn out, and in some aspects we didn't, or we didn't turn out in some of the places that we need to. So I'm careful of that narrative getting out there and making that supposition. Um, in terms of the vice presidential pick, I think that's one place that Vice President Biden has a real chance to get a shot of energy to his campaign.
Mm.
Yes, having a woman on the ticket is important. We saw that last time with Secretary Hillary Clinton on the ticket as a woman and the excitement that generated, but it wasn't enough. I think right now, if you look at what he needs to win, he has to rebuild that Obama coalition,
Mm.
young people, people of color, people that don't usually vote. And what gets people excited is, I think having an African American woman on the ticket would be incredible. I think he's got a lot of really good options, a lot of really good qualified folks that he can choose from. I think, of course, there's a lot of talk around Senator
Sure.
Kamala Harris as being
Sure.
one. I think she brings a lot of energy and has a lot that she brings to the ticket she's my personal favorite to go on. So we can put a side bet on that. I think the pick will be Kamala Harris at this
Oh,
point.
wow.
Um, that's my guess.
You, you
Some
know,
of the
you know,
other,
you know, you know something. I see a surprise coming, and you're gonna say, DC, you
yeah,
may be wrong.
uh,
Susan Rice. I think she's a dark horse, and I don't mean it in terms of being negative, but I don't think a lot of people have focused on her, so to speak. But I think she brings all of those foreign policy credentials. She brings all of that strong black woman,
yeah,
and who was
yeah,
who was in the Obama administration, by the way.
yeah,
Now, and of
yeah,
course, Republicans hate her, and so
yeah.
again, that's why we love her.
Well,
So I think
it's
she's a
funny you
dark
say
horse.
that because that's exactly who I was going to say next.
Whoa.
She has been the dark the I don't the, she's been the candidate from behind the scenes that there's a
Exactly.
lot of speculation and talk about, and it's growing louder and louder and louder. I think she is a strong candidate. She brings incredible
Mhm.
credentials. I think for me, one of the challenges in a Rice candidacy is just we haven't seen her as a candidate before. It's
Yes.
one thing to be smart, brilliant, credentialed. How does that translate to retail politics? How does she make? A lot of times people go in the booth. It's about how a candidate makes them feel, right? And I haven't seen that from her. I don't know what that is from her. I hope and suspect that she should be great, but I just haven't seen that. So that doesn't give me the same degree of confidence that I have in watching some of these other players that we've seen on the national stage already. But you're absolutely right. You must be. I bet you're in some of those private rooms having
There
conversations
you
right
go. There
now.
you
Yeah,
go. I'm on the phone just like you. I'm calling my contacts. Hey, what do you think?
yeah,
What do you think?
yeah, yeah.
Switching over, and I want to hit back on COVID and our healthcare policy in our country. I think all the health indices show that Black folks took a major hit and are taking a major hit when it comes to COVID-19 in terms of deaths, in terms of hospitalizations, in terms of those who are actually getting, and we've got those comorbidities. Um, in a lot of these red states that are now opening back up, by the way, and have opened back
Mhm.
up, Medicaid was not expanded. And I'm not asking you from a policy standpoint, but you know, do we need to expand Medicaid to make sure we catch that safety net? Because there are some folks that make below the $35,000 family limit that could really use good, affordable health care, but because some of our states have not expanded, they're left out.
I tell you what, this COVID crisis has shown all of us just um, how inadequate the safety net is that
Mm,
we have in this country. Too often, people get very comfortable in their jobs and they're very comfortable with their career outlooks. But this has demonstrated that nobody is safe, right?
mm, right.
And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of talk on the Hill right now from Democrats about using this opportunity to shore up the Affordable Care Act.
Mm.
Right, because we find that more people should be able to qualify for it, should be able to utilize that for their health care going forward. I think there'll be a vote. The House in the House, at least, there'll be a vote on shoring up the Affordable Care Act later this month. But you're right. Medicaid, anything, the conversations around universal health care, right? Just
Sure.
regardless of where you stand on that, I think you have a recognition right now that something has to be done.
Sure.
And I think that we are leading to a moment where we could see something. And I think, what happens in the next Congress, I think, if you have a
Yeah.
Democrat as president, you have a Democratic House and Senate, I hope they will take action on doing something quickly. Of course, we did that during the Obama administration last time, but it looks like we may have to do that again.
Wow. We've got Isaac Fordjour on the show today, and I want to make sure I get as much information out of him as possible. I want to jump to something I know that you're very passionate about, and how you feel, and we all feel the same thing about our people. DC, you're in DC, and the streets of DC at one point had troops on them, and I don't know what that looks like, because we didn't have troops on our streets. Of course, we had the police and we had state troopers and so forth. But we only saw from a breaking news standpoint. What did it look like in DC to have troops around, stationed at all the federal properties and so forth? I don't know if Americans are used to seeing. I hope we don't ever get used to that, Isaac. What did it look like for you personally?
It was one of the most jarring things that you've ever seen. My office is in downtown Washington, not far from the White House, and I needed to come downtown to take care of some business, and not being able to turn on streets, where there are Humvees and military attire in the shadow of, the Washington Monument, or all these iconic things that speak to American ideals and democracy. And yet you see troops stationed there facing down American citizens. It was one of the most jarring experiences, and one that I'll never forget. We often, as Americans, we talked about American greatness before. It didn't look much different than if you were in Iran or if you were in Egypt, during the times of unrest or whatever. When you approach the White House and you look at this large, this several feet high fence, encapsulating it, going all around the block. That's not what America is about. But what was enlightening was seeing the number of American people who were out in the streets, that were demanding our rights, that were, that fence, putting, messages of solidarity on this fence that was meant to keep us out and keep our voices down. And we turned that into a microphone. Wow. So, it renewed my hope in America. At the same time that it reminded me that we have to be vigilant, right? Because those forces that speak to the worst of us, or that seek to divide us, or that seek to put up walls around us, if given the opportunity, that's exactly what they'll do. And I think many times we take America for granted. We take democracy for granted. But this moment should show us just how fragile that is, and how it's each of our own personal responsibilities. This is something that has to become personal. I took my children out, and, these are not things that, you're teaching your children about America and civics and this, that, and the other. And now I'm having to teach my children about protests, in 2020.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And I think that that's part of the American experience, and it always will be. And we should continue to use our voice.
Well, I was, my daughter and I were trying to schedule a visit to DC here, and in the really this week. And of course, my aunt lives there, and she said, well, things are still pretty much shut down. And my daughter has never been to DC. Of course, I've been several times. You and I have been able to lunch and so forth together. But when does the mayor expect there to be a level that you can get in phase 3, where people can still come and enjoy their city? Because Washington, D.C. belongs to all of us. And I don't think I want to see troops on the street, but I do want to make sure that I'm at the African American Museum to view what I consider to be my history, and to be able to reflect on that sacred ground. Have you heard anything yet about?
I haven't heard. What I will tell you is that our mayor is doing a great job, and she's trying to make sure that DC is safe for you to visit it, and that when you leave DC, when you go back home, your hometown will be safe. So I'm not sure. Things are opening up. The troops are no longer there. Some of the buildings are still boarded up. I think within the next several weeks, we will see the fruit of our sacrifice, staying home and all, and we should see things open up. But I wouldn't plan that visit here for a while, brother.
Wow, man. Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
gonna be a while.
Hey, look, CBC's off this year, and we
It's
live
not
a lot.
off. It's not off. It's
It's
just virtual.
going to be
So
virtual.
you may not get to go party, but you'll be
Wait a
able to
minute.
you'll still
You
be
mean
able to learn.
you mean I can't get a chance to go to the policy
Yeah,
symposiums in
you can go
person?
to the Palace Expo. That's right.
That's okay. I've been to some of your policy symposiums, and let
Right,
me tell you,
right.
they're some of the best symposiums you've ever been to. And let me tell you something, brother. What you got any parting thoughts for our listeners and our viewers right here on Funky Politics today, Isaac?
Look. It's been great talking to you. I love what you brothers are doing on Funky Politics. Keep doing it. I just want people to stay engaged, keep the passion, keep protesting, but most importantly, make sure your vote is heard in that ballot box. And let's change this country, man. This country's been changing fast over the last several weeks. There's got a lot of changing to do, but we can make it happen.
Let me tell you something, folks. Isaac Fordjour, he is I'm gonna shout him out as a Memphis treasure that we loaned to
Always.
DC, that we loaned to
No.
Washington DC, and I believe the bill is almost due, Doc. So your time is up there. We need your leadership back down south because there's some change that's coming in down south, and I tell you what, we got a lot of great leaders here in our town and in our state and in our region. But I tell you, what you do in DC, please keep up the great work. You are phenomenal, man. You're magnificent. Thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you,
Funky
brother.
Politics, man.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
All right, appreciate it, Doc. You know what? I tell you, on Funky Politics, I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of great friends, meet a lot of new friends, and Isaac Fordjour is one of those young brothers who is out there doing the damn thing, y'all. He keeps it real, he keeps it right, he keeps it funky, just like Funky Politics. Make sure you stay with us. Check us out on all of our social media platforms, and check out a bunch of our shows that we've already had before, and we've already done, and you know what? We'd be glad that you did. And we'll see you again next time right here on Funky Politics. I am DC, and I'm out of here.